My greedy brother locked me in a cold, dark basement for 2 years while he lived in luxury. Here's what happened when the tables turned. While Derek lived like a king, I lived in the shadows of our family's home, struggling to breathe in the cold, dark basement. It's a strange thing, living under the same roof as someone who treats you like you don't even exist. But that's what I did for nearly 2 years. Every night, I'd lay awake on the old couch, listening to the sound of laughter upstairs, wondering how my brother could sleep so soundly in his plush bed while I froze beneath him. The basement wasn't much of a space to call home. It smelled like mold and old, forgotten memories. The walls were damp, the concrete floor freezing to the touch. There was no heat, no warmth, and certainly no comfort. But Derek? Derek had it all. The mansion, the big screen TV, the plush leather couches, the gourmet kitchen. It was like he was living a life that I could only dream of, a life that was built on lies and manipulation. His lies, to be exact. I remember the first night I moved back in. My business had collapsed, leaving me with nothing, no apartment, no savings, and no pride left to cling to. So I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I moved back into the family home. I thought it would be temporary. A pit stop while I figured things out. Little did I know my brother had other plans. "Can you make do with the basement for now?" Derek asked me when I called him, desperate and defeated. I was so broken that I said yes. What else could I do? But when I saw where I would be living, the very place that had once been a dark, neglected corner of the house, I realized how far I'd fallen. He had his own bedroom. The master suite, of course. And there was Gabriella, his wife, always by his side, living in comfort while I was shoved into a basement that could barely be called a living space. Even when I asked for a simple favor, like using the bathroom inside the house, he'd snap at me to use the side door. It wasn't just about the space. It was about the power he had over me, the control he exercised without a second thought. The walls in that basement closed in on me, not just because of the physical space, but because of the way Derek made me feel. I wasn't his brother anymore. I was an inconvenience. A problem to be ignored, shoved into the corner of the house, out of sight, out of mind. And what hurt the most wasn't just the way he treated me, it was the fact that he could do it without a hint of guilt. While I struggled in the basement, Derek carried on with his life as if nothing had changed, as if I wasn't even there. That first night, staring up at the cold, cement ceiling, I realized something that hit me like a ton of bricks. Derek wasn't just living in a mansion, he was living in a lie. And somewhere along the way, I'd become the collateral damage in his game of manipulation. This was only the beginning. The part of the story that would make everything else feel like a cruel joke. Because soon, everything would change. When you lose everything, returning home isn't a victory, it's a defeat. That was the harsh reality I faced when my life came crashing down around me. I had always prided myself on being independent, on building something from the ground up. But that all came to a screeching halt when my business venture went under. It wasn't just a minor setback. It was catastrophic. One moment I had it all, a growing company, plans for the future, and the kind of success I'd always dreamed of. The next, I was left with nothing. No savings. No apartment. No job prospects. My phone rang with calls I couldn't afford to answer, my inbox filled with overdue notices I couldn't even look at. I couldn't even afford to keep my own apartment. The thought of being homeless was too much to bear, so I did the one thing I'd sworn I'd never do. I called Derek. My older brother. The one who had always been the golden child in the family, the one who seemed to have it all together. I expected sympathy. I expected understanding. Instead, I got silence. He didn't even hesitate before answering, "Yeah, we can make room, but just so you know, the guest room's already taken. Maybe you could crash in the garage for a while." I remember the way he said it. The casual, almost dismissive tone. Like he was offering me a favor when really it felt more like a burden. But what could I do? My pride was the last thing I had left, and even that was slipping away. So I moved back in. Into the house where I grew up, a place I had swore I would never return to, especially not like this. I thought things would be different, that maybe the old comfort of home would make things easier. But nothing had changed. Nothing at all. Derek had moved in with his wife, Anna, a few years before. They had taken over the entire upstairs. Derek, of course, had the master bedroom, and Anna, well, she was his partner in everything, it seemed, including the life I was no longer a part of. And then there was me. Stuck in the garage. The cold, dusty, and completely unwelcoming garage. I had no choice but to make do. The garage wasn't much. The cement floor was icy, the boxes of junk stacked up high, and there was a distinct smell of oil and old cardboard. But it was better than nothing, right? At least it was under the same roof, even though it felt more like a forgotten corner of the house, a place left behind. That's when the resentment started to build. I wasn't just living in the garage. I was living in the shadow of everything Derek had built for himself. He and Anna had everything. The big bedroom, the big bed, the big screen TV. They even had a home office with a beautiful desk and everything organized perfectly. Meanwhile, I had a folding chair and a blanket on a broken-down cot in the corner of a room I didn't even want to call a bedroom. I remember standing at the edge of the driveway one morning, staring at the houses Derek pulled out in his shiny new car. I was getting used to watching him live in luxury while I was left to piece together what was left of my dignity. Before I share what happened next, the moment that changed everything, I want to connect with you, my amazing viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop your country's flag in the comments below. And if you've ever had to fight for something you believe in, hit that like button because this story is just getting started. But as the days passed, something inside me started to shift. Derek's indifference to my struggle, his casual dismissal of my situation made me question everything about our relationship. The once tight bond we shared was slowly crumbling under the weight of his greed and my humiliation. It wasn't just the garage. It was the way he treated me like I was nothing more than a problem to be solved, a nuisance to be tolerated. Things were about to change. I didn't know how or when, but I knew it wouldn't be like this forever. I wasn't going to stay hidden away forever. And Derek's perfect world? It was only a matter of time before it came crashing down too. As the days dragged on in the cold basement, something started to feel off. It wasn't just the draft from the broken windows or the fact that I could hear Derek's laughter through the walls while I froze in silence. No, there was something else. A strange energy in the house, like a silent storm building on the horizon. I couldn't put my finger on it at first. But as I spent more time in the shadows of that basement, I began to notice small things that didn't add up. It started with the papers. Crumpled receipts, odd bank statements, and even random loan applications hidden behind stacks of old boxes in the basement. At first, I thought it was just clutter, Derek's usual mess. But as I sifted through the papers one evening, I noticed something that made my heart race. Casino receipts. And not just a few stacks of them. Dozens, maybe more. All with Derek's name on them. I froze, the weight of what I was seeing sinking in. Gambling. It wasn't just a one-time slip-up. This had been going on for a long time. But that was just the beginning. Next, I found a series of bank statements buried deep in a shoebox. At first, they looked like normal paperwork, but as I examined them more closely, the numbers were too high. Too risky. I could see large sums of money being withdrawn, money I knew Derek didn't have. Money that wasn't just coming from his paychecks. I could feel the panic starting to bubble up in my chest. Derek had always been the golden child, the one who never had to work hard for anything. I had assumed it was just luck, that he was lucky enough to have it all handed to him. But now it was becoming clear that his life had been built on a house of cards, and those cards were about to come tumbling down. I wasn't the only one noticing. I could see it in Anna's eyes too. The subtle tension whenever Derek wasn't around. The way she'd glance at him, then quickly look away. It was like she knew something wasn't right, but she was too afraid to ask. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. One evening, I overheard Derek on the phone in the kitchen. His voice was low, but I could make out enough to hear the desperation. "Just one more week," he said. "I'll make it back. I swear, I'll fix it." There was a long pause. I know. But just give me a little more time." I didn't need to hear more. I already knew what he was up to. He had dug himself into a deep hole, and it was only a matter of time before the rest of the family found out. He was playing with fire, and I was starting to wonder how much longer we could avoid the burn. The more I dug into the papers, the more I uncovered. Loan after loan, credit card applications in his name, debts piling up faster than he could cover them. My stomach churned as I realized that Derek hadn't just been gambling away his own money, he had been gambling with our family's future. Our inheritance. Mom's savings. The house we grew up in. All of it was at risk, all because of Derek's reckless, self-destructive habits. I kept telling myself I should confront him. That I should show him what I had found. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to expose the full extent of his deceit. Instead, I kept digging. Each new discovery added another layer of horror to the pile. I found more receipts. More bank statements. More proof that my brother had been living a lie. And every time I uncovered something new, my anger grew. He had stolen from us. He had manipulated everyone around him, including me. And now the truth was slowly coming to light. I knew what I had to do. But it wasn't going to be easy. Derek had built his empire on lies, and bringing it all down was going to take more than just confronting him. It was going to take planning, patience, and most importantly, it was going to take control. The pieces were all coming together and I could feel the storm approaching. I didn't know when it would hit, but I knew it would. And when it did, Derek would have nowhere to hide. Not in that mansion. Not in the lies he had built. He had it all until he lost everything. And now it was my turn to reclaim what's rightfully mine. The truth was out. Derek's web of lies, his gambling addiction, his financial destruction, it was all laid bare in front of me. I had gathered the evidence, pieced it together, and now I was ready to make my move. I had spent months living in that damn basement, invisible, humiliated. But now, the tables were about to turn and I wasn't going to let Derek walk away from this mess unscathed. I spent every waking hour thinking about how I could take control back. Derek had used manipulation, lies, and deceit to get what he wanted. But I was done letting him rule this family. This house, the one we grew up in, was supposed to be ours, not his to destroy with his reckless behavior. Max and Sophia were my lifeline through all of this. They had seen my struggle, had watched Derek take everything I had, and they were ready to help me turn the tide. We devised a plan. With the evidence in hand, I knew that the one thing Derek cared about most, his pride, his status, was on the line. The house, the mansion that he had called his own, was teetering on the edge of financial ruin. But I could do something about that. I wasn't just going to let it slip away. I was going to take it back, and in doing so, reclaim the power that Derek had stolen from me. Max, with his connections, helped me secure a loan. Sophia, always the calm one, helped me stay focused, reminding me why this wasn't just about revenge, it was about taking back what was mine, what was rightfully ours. Together, we worked behind the scenes, playing Derek's game better than he ever could. The day of the auction, I stood outside the house, watching as Derek paced nervously inside, unaware of what was about to happen. His world was about to come crashing down, and I was the one holding the hammer. The auctioneer called the bid, and I raised my paddle. Derek had no idea what was going on. He thought he had everything under control, but he didn't. I outbid him, buying the house from under his nose. It was a surreal moment, one I had imagined in my head countless times, but never truly believed would come to pass. The house that had once been a symbol of his success, his control, was now mine. And as I walked through those front doors, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what I had just done. This wasn't just about taking the house back. It was about taking back my life. But I wasn't done yet. When Derek finally realized what had happened, when the reality of his situation set in, it was almost too late. He came storming into the house, demanding answers, his face red with rage. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. I smiled. "You lost everything, Derek. The house, the money, your pride. It's all mine now." It was more than a moment of triumph. It was a moment of justice. Derek had spent years controlling everyone around him, including me. He had manipulated, lied, and stolen from the family he was supposed to protect. But now it was my turn. The ultimate punishment, the one I knew would break him, came next. I turned to him with a cold, calculated smile and said the words that sealed his fate. "You can stay, Derek. But you're staying in the basement." The look on his face was priceless. He couldn't believe it. After everything he had put me through, this was how it ended. Forced to live in the very space he had made me suffer in for so long. The very basement he had relegated me to. But this wasn't just about getting even. It was about making Derek understand what it felt like to be powerless, to be at the mercy of someone else's control. It wasn't about revenge, it was about teaching him a lesson he would never forget. As he unpacked his things and set up his cot in the same corner where I had once slept, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and something else. It was bittersweet. Seeing him so broken, so desperate, made me realize that this wasn't the victory I had imagined. The man I once called my brother was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize, a person consumed by greed and addiction. But he had to face the consequences of his actions. And for me, that was enough. As I watched him from the window, pacing back and forth in the basement, I knew one thing for sure, this was just the beginning. The house was mine. My life was mine again. And now Derek had to figure out what he was going to do with the wreckage of his own making. He thought he had it all. But in the end, it was me who had the last laugh. As I watched Derek's world fall apart through that dirty basement window, I realized something. It wasn't just his life that shattered, it was ours. The taste of victory, the sweet revenge I had longed for, had a bitterness I hadn't anticipated. Every day, I would stand by the window watching him pace back and forth in the basement. The same basement that had once been my prison. His movements were frantic, his face twisted in anger and disbelief as he tried to comprehend the reality of his situation. It was as though he couldn't process what had happened, couldn't accept that everything he had built, his reputation, his success, his world, was now gone. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something unexpected. A sense of sorrow, maybe even regret. I had one. I had taken back what was mine, what he had stolen from me. But now that I had it, the victory felt hollow. I had wanted justice. I had wanted him to feel the weight of his actions. But seeing him like this, broken and lost, made me question whether I had done the right thing. Was this really justice, or was it something darker? Something that left a scar on both of us? Derek's once confident and smug face had been replaced with someone I barely recognized. He was no longer the brother I had once looked up to. He wasn't the man who had everything. Now he was just a shadow of that person, staring at the remnants of his former life through the very window I had once stared out of. It was like watching a mirror of my own past, except now I was the one on the other side. There was something painfully poetic about it all. I had been trapped in that basement for months, forced to watch as Derek lived a life I would never have. And now he was the one trapped. He was the one who had to look through that filthy window, seeing everything he had lost. It was as if the universe had turned the tables in the most cruel and fitting way. But as I stood there watching him struggle, I couldn't help but feel a wave of sadness. This wasn't the brother I had known. The man I had once admired and envied had been consumed by his own lies and greed. And now, as I watched him lose everything, I realized just how much we had both lost. I couldn't bring myself to feel triumphant. Yes, I had taken back control of my life and I had forced Derek to face the consequences of his actions. But at what cost? Our relationship, once so close, was now fractured beyond repair. The family we had been a part of, the family that had been our foundation, was no more. For all the satisfaction I had in seeing him pay for his mistakes, I couldn't ignore the sorrow that gnawed at me. I had forced my brother to see everything he had taken from me, everything he had built at my expense, crumble before his eyes. But in doing so, I had also destroyed what little we had left of each other. The house was mine. The power was mine. But the price of that power was the loss of the only family I had left. I had one, but at the expense of everything I had once cherished. And now, as I watched Derek through that basement window, I realized that the family bond we had shared was broken beyond repair. I couldn't undo the damage. And maybe, in the end, that was the greatest tragedy of all.